Joey saw Haley appear on the casino's security footage for the third time, and in that moment he knew he had crossed the line of ordinary suspicion and stepped fully into a territory from which there was no return. It was no longer a vague sense of unease, no longer just an instinct that something was off about the young woman who always presented herself as gentle, devoted, grateful to Bill. It had become a rising anger, laced with a sense of personal offense at the thought that Bill, with everything he had sacrificed, might be the target of some filthy staged scheme. Joey was no perfect man, but he had a very clear boundary. He would not tolerate anyone playing games with the trust of the person who had reached down to pull him out of the gutter. Haley had pressed exactly against that limit, and the image of Randy sitting across from her, that ambiguous smile, his hand resting far too close, the possessive, taunting look in his eyes, made Joey feel as if all of Fairmont Crest had been stained. When he handed the video over to Bill, it was not just a warning. It was a way of stripping off the crushing weight on his chest, as if he had done the last decent thing left to do, show Bill the truth, or at least something that looked brutally like the truth. But in that very moment, a new path split open, not only for Bill but for Joey himself, as he realized that from now on, every choice he made would push all of them into a danger far greater than he had imagined. Bill watched the video in silence. No words, no explosive reaction. But behind that calm exterior was a cold storm. He had seen betrayal before, had been wounded, had watched people he thought would stand by him forever switch sides the second money, power, or selfish emotion called their names. Haley had stepped into his life as a pause, a quiet reminder that he could still believe in something imperfect yet sincere. And now these images came crashing down like a hammer on that fragile faith he thought had finally solidified. Yet Bill was no longer at an age where he would scream, throw things, or shatter everything in a useless fit. He had learned to swallow, to observe, to wait. He did not fully trust Joey. Joey had a past of his own, an agenda of his own. He did not fully believe Haley was innocent either, because no truly clean person shows up at a casino multiple times with someone as dangerous as Randy. Bill chose silence, chose to hire Dawson, not only to verify the truth but also to test Haley, to see which face she would reveal when cornered. The fury inside him did not erupt. It existed like a sharp blade, waiting patiently for the moment to slice through every layer of disguise. Dawson was pragmatic by nature, unmoved by affairs, betrayals, or tears. To him, this case was an equation, and Randy was a painfully obvious variable. Within days, the file unfolded with details of illegal networks, money laundering, extortion, and violence. Randy was not just some gambler. He was the man behind operations that someone like Bill should never be dragged into. But what drew Dawson's attention was not only Randy. It was Haley's name, appearing halfway in the data, blurred references, vague transfers, coinciding locations. Not enough to declare her complicit, but enough to plant a poisonous seed in Bill's mind. If Haley was not entirely innocent, then what was she? A victim being pulled in? Or someone who had chosen to step into the dark to trade for something of her own? When Dawson handed over the results, Bill gave a brief thanks, but his eyes grew deeper, darker. He began to understand that this was not simply about the woman he loved running into the wrong person. It might be a fragment of a larger plan designed to make him prey. And Bill knew that in his world, if you wanted to expose someone's true face, you could not charge at them head-on. You had to let them reveal themselves inside the trap you built. Haley never expected the video to reach Bill so quickly. The moment she accidentally saw the messages, the data Joey had sent, her heart dropped to the bottom. Being found out was not just fear. It was panic mixed with rage. She had always convinced herself that everything she did had a justified reason. To secure a place, to escape her past, to never again be dragged around by someone else's leash. Randy had once been the rope tying her to that world, a past of twisted gratitude and obsession, where she owed him something she could never fully repay with a simple goodbye. Haley thought she was in control, meeting Randy to negotiate, to delay, to find a clean cut before Bill suspected anything. But Joey had seen. Joey had shattered her cover. Anger flared in layers. at Randy for pushing her into this corner, at Bill for daring to doubt her, but most of all at Joey for appointing himself judge and executioner. In that moment, Haley no longer felt like a helpless victim. She was a trapped animal, and her survival instincts began to consider far more ruthless options. Randy gave Haley no room for calm thought. He held her by the throat with the secrets she had desperately tried to bury and used them like a tightening noose. To Randy, Bill was not a man, he was a wallet, a symbol of power that, if drained or destroyed, would earn Randy a higher seat in the underworld. He needed Haley as a doorway, and when he saw her wavering, he pushed harder. He reminded her of the times he had saved her, the debts, the vague promises she had let slip in her most desperate years. He did not care whether Haley loved Bill. He only knew that once she lost control of her emotions, she would make mistakes, and every mistake was leverage he could use. Haley was being torn in two. One part of her wanted to run back to Bill, confess, beg forgiveness, risk losing everything but keep her dignity. The other part, colder, reminded her that if Randy went down, he would drag her with him, exposing everything, turning her from a sympathetic wife into a willing accomplice in the eyes of all. Fairmont Crest. And in that world, once branded that way, there would be no more second chances. Joey thought he had done the right thing, but with every hour that passed after handing over the video, the gnawing guilt grew sharper. He started to realize that he had not only exposed a possible betrayal, but also triggered a chain reaction far beyond his control. Joey was used to seeing things in black and white, but here, the deeper he looked, the more everything turned to gray. He saw Haley's panic, Bill's unsettling silence, Randy's sudden absence from familiar places. He understood that by tying a man like Randy to a man like Bill, he had connected two live wires. If Bill chose confrontation, Randy would not stay quiet. If Haley chose to protect Bill, she would have to betray Randy. If she chose Randy, everything would collapse. Every path was soaked in betrayal. Joey had never meant to be the one who pulled the trigger, but he had already pulled the pin on a grenade, and now it sat between the three of them, waiting to see who would kick it away and who would clutch it to their chest. His initial anger began to twist into anxiety, into a sense of being trapped himself, because if things spiraled, he knew he might become a target as well. Bill began his own dangerous game. He did not confront Haley right away. Instead, he chose to watch every gesture, every glance, every half-formed explanation. He gave her room to slip and gave himself time to separate hurt from reason. His silence made Haley even more unsettled. She did not know what he had seen, how much he believed, what he was thinking, and that void pushed her into spinning scenarios in her mind. Excuses, strategies, defenses. Haley decided to lean fully into the role of the victim, using the miscarriage as her last shield. She dragged out images of pain, blood, loss, things that would soften any human heart, as a diversion, hoping Bill would see her as a broken woman, unstable and easily misunderstood. But there, she made a fatal mistake, turning maternal grief into a tool. A man like Bill, even if moved, would eventually recognize the taste of manipulation if it was served to him too many times. Meanwhile, Randy sensed Haley's resistance. She no longer obeyed him completely, no longer showed up whenever he demanded, no longer accepted his plans as inevitable. He realized another force was pulling her away, strong enough to turn his pawn into a potential traitor. Randy began to consider eliminating Joey, identifying him as the spark. He also weighed the option of driving Haley into a no-return scenario. If she was already under suspicion, then push her deeper, make Bill turn his back, leave her with only Randy to cling to. That was his brand of cruelty. Cornering someone half terrified, half indebted, until they became his unwilling accomplice. The more she was pressured, the harder Haley became. Her fear slowly evolved into anger, especially as she recognized that every man around her, Bill, Joey, Randy, was using her in his own way, whether to protect, to expose, or to exploit. Their world began to crack through small but undeniable signs. Bill altered his schedule without warning, staged short trips like traps to monitor Haley's reactions. Joey accidentally appeared where she did not expect, his eyes sometimes apologetic, sometimes watchful. Randy stayed away from crowds, shifting to covert messages, threats laced with promises of freedom if she would just finish the job. Dawson quietly dug deeper, asking not only about Randy, but about why someone like Haley stood at the crossroads of such dangerous forces. Each of them was silently preparing for a trial with no courtroom where the weakest would be sacrificed. Haley, in the center of the storm, finally understood there was no safe option left. If she destroyed the evidence and pinned everything on Joey, she would have to accept becoming ruthless, willing to ruin the reputation of the one man who had tried to protect Bill. If she kept playing the victim, she would need to weave lie upon lie over the miscarriage story, turning her trauma into a prop so completely that even she might forget what was real. If she turned back and exposed Randy, she would drag herself into the light as well, risk losing Bill, her position, everything she had built. Every choice was a betrayal of her past, her present, the man who trusted her, or the self she still wanted to believe she was. In the dark, with no one watching, Haley finally faced the most terrifying truth. She had gone so far in curating her own image that truth versus lies no longer felt like morality, only strategy for survival. Joey, meanwhile, was torn between digging further and stepping back. He was no fool. He could see Haley had discovered the evidence he sent to Bill, and he understood that from now on, he would be a thorn in the side of both her and Randy. The half-formed guilt made him want to go to Bill, confess everything. His motives, his biases, his fear that he had unleashed something uncontrollable. But pride and the fear of being labeled the troublemaker stopped him. Joey began telling himself that everything was Haley's choice, Randy's choice, Bill's choice. He was only the messenger. Yet beneath that defensive shell, he knew he carried a subtle jealousy of Bill, an irritation that Haley occupied a place he never would. Those personal feelings, whether he admitted them or not, had pushed him to act faster, harsher. Realizing that, his anger shifted. He was angry at himself for letting emotion bleed into judgment, angry at the power structure of Fairmont Crest that turned every bond into a game where sincerity was worth less than a clever move. The quieter Bill became, the more taut his inner world grew. He did not want to believe Haley would be the one to drive the knife into his back, but a lifetime of experience. In business, in war with rivals, in narrowly surviving misplaced trust, whispered that he had to be ready for the worst-case scenario. His hurt froze into something sharper, and when Bill turned cold, he became dangerous. He was no longer just waiting for Haley's slip. He was constructing a sequence of tests designed to peel back every layer of her story. He left small gaps in security, shifted assets, released bits of information that could tempt anyone plotting against him. If there was someone behind all this, if Randy was truly using Haley to get close, then the trap would force them into motion. And in that game, whether she liked it or not, Haley became the focal point of every gaze. When every wire is pulled to breaking point, someone is bound to choose something extreme. Randy would never accept being cut off from his prize and might orchestrate an accident, a scenario that would deepen Haley's dependence on him. Haley might choose to fake being the victim of an attack Randy himself arranged, then crawl back to Bill in tears, recasting Randy as the only monster and washing herself clean. Bill could see that coming and choose not to hold her, stepping back instead to watch her script unravel in real time. Joey might be the only one who truly saw how twisted the whole structure had become and yet no longer have the power to stop it. At this crossroads, every character was standing at the brink. All afraid to lose, all seething, all convinced they had their own righteous reasons, and because of that, all ready to do things they would never have believed themselves capable of a year before. From a single video in a casino, the story had outgrown a simple question of infidelity and turned into a tangled web of debt, power, self-defense, emotional manipulation, and raw survival. Haley was no longer the frail girl. She was a woman pushing the limits of her morality between two crushing forces: Bill was no longer just a man deciding whether to trust. He was an architect of a silent war meant to prevent his next downfall. Joey was no longer the bystander guarding the gate. He was the catalyst for every looming tragedy. Right and wrong, hero and culprit at once. Randy remained the filthy shadow, but his presence illuminated the darkness each of them was desperate to hide. And as they each began to choose destructive ways to protect themselves, the question was no longer, did Haley betray Bill? But, in this game, who will betray themselves first, and will the price stop at a broken heart? Or will it be the loss of any chance to still be seen as human?